again, Alicia Sedgwick here, and I am delighted to introduce to you Bruce Rosenstein. He is the managing editor of Leader to Leader, author, speaker, blogger, speaking today on a forward-focused mindset for the entrepreneurs of today and tomorrow. It's my pleasure to welcome Bruce Rosenstein.
Well, thank you, Alicia. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone at One Business World at the U conference. I've been, Stelios especially, Stelios and I are longtime friends and colleagues in this sort of world. So I'm really excited to be here today. And what we're going to talk about, as Alicia said, is this idea of the forward-focused mindset as it relates to entrepreneurs. And I've been watching virtually every session for the past couple of days, so I'm a little bit on information overload. But so I've taken a lot in, and so in my talk today, and we do want to have some time for Q&A at the end. So in my talk today, what I want to do is bring new things to you. And you've heard a lot about mindset over the past couple of days. You've heard a lot about how entrepreneurs and prospective entrepreneurs need information and how they need high quality information. So part of what I'm going to do today is to talk to you about what maybe some of those sources of information might be. So the things that are informing what I'm going to speak to today, a few different things. These are my two books. Create Your Future the Peter Drucker Way is the more recent one. The very first book back in 2009 was Living in More Than One World, How Peter Drucker's Wisdom Can Inspire and Transform Your Life. So Peter Drucker was I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a few moments, but a major name in the world of business and really beyond that. And I was very fortunate to have studied, I still study his work a lot. He died in 2005 at the age of 95. He was almost 96 when he died. And I have written about him for many years, and I was privileged to have interviewed him a number of times, both for my books and for USA Today. I used to work for USA Today newspaper. I worked there for 21 years. I did write about business books for the money section, but my main work was as a corporate librarian. And we're going to talk a little bit about that work and how it's informed what I will talk to you about today. The other things besides, if you look at the foreword of Living in More Than One World, Frances Hesselbein, an amazing person. She started the organization that eventually started Leader to Leader, the publication where I've been managing editor for the past 11 years. And just like working with Peter was a real privilege, working with Frances, who's the editor or now co-editor in chief, just a super privilege. And somebody who I'd be happy to tell you about kind of another time. We don't have a whole lot of time today, but if you're not familiar with her, I would look her up online. Just an amazing person. So she and her colleagues started what was, after she was the CEO of the Girl Scouts of the USA, when she retired, she and a couple colleagues started what became the Peter F. Drucker Foundation for Nonprofit Management. And then in a few years, they started this publication, Leader to Leader. So I'm proud to say we recently had last year we had our 100th issue. I'm working on issue number, I think it's 106 now. And so this will really inform my talk today, what I learned from working with the authors. And I should say that Leader to Leader is written by leaders for leaders, as you can see from the title. So we don't have freelance writers, we don't have staff writers. It's all mostly different writers in each issue. And I will say, some of you may have seen the great presentation by Ruth Godian the other day. And we have an article coming up by Ruth in our summer issue, which should be out in, actually it's coming out in June. And I urge you to look out for that. Now, very quickly on Peter Drucker, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest civilian honor in the country. So he did a lot of consulting for major corporations, but also nonprofits and the Girl Scouts of the USA, as you see there. And that's how he met Frances Hesselbein and started working with her back in 1981. Sold millions and millions of books, continues to do that. And wouldn't it be great to teach at a school named after you? So the Drucker School, a wonderful MBA program in Claremont, California. And especially today, why we're keying in on Peter, at least for this part of the talk, is his thoughts on entrepreneurs. So an absolute classic book, which I would recommend to everyone on this conference, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. It came out in 1985. It's still read, it's still cited, absolutely classic book. And if you look at the quotes that are up here on the screen, you see that it really speaks to this whole idea of mindset and how you think. And as he says, it's behavior rather than personality trait. Because if you thought that just only certain personality traits would work for entrepreneurs, well, that would really narrow the field of people going into it. And then an incredible, wonderful quote here: entrepreneurs see change as the norm and healthy. So I think that's a real advantage for entrepreneurs, because I think most people really don't see change. They sort of shy away from change and don't see it as healthy. So I would really recommend for people here today, if you're not that familiar with Peter Drucker, to learn more about him, either through my books or his own books or elsewhere. There's a tremendous amount of information out there about him. And especially this book, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Now, before we get to Leader to Leader and some of the sources of information from Leader to Leader, I mentioned that I came from at least partially from the corporate library world. And so as I said, you've heard a lot of information over the past couple of days from these speakers about that, you need information, high quality information in order to run your business, to start it and to run it. So part of the question here is, where are you going to find this? So this is a group, their URL is AIIP.org. As you see, they're the Association of Independent Information Professionals. So they're a group of, I would say, very highly business-oriented information professionals, generally solo entrepreneurs or solopreneurs. And they work with, I'm recommending them in two ways. I'm recommending as an organization that you might want to learn more about, possibly in joining them or in partnering with them in some way. But also, if you go into their website, you'll see that you can hire people through this site, hire independents who do things like competitive intelligence, which we heard over the past couple of days, things like taxonomies, which are very important if you're building databases related to your companies. So you'll find people who you can partner up with and hire on a short-term basis or whatever. Maybe on a longer-term basis. So I would really recommend you check out AIIP. You see at the bottom of their screen, their annual conference is coming up soon, which leads me to the next slide, AIIP, the Rogers Summit Lecture Award honorees. I was really privileged back in 2016 to be awarded the Rogers Summit Award. I gave the Rogers Summit annual lecture in Pittsburgh at their annual conference. And Roger Summit himself was there and introduced me. And I would really recommend to folks on this webinar or on this conference to learn more about Roger Summit. If you just check him online, you'll find that he was the founder of Dialogue, which was one of the absolute earliest information companies, pre-web, and it's still around. He's still around. He's been retired for a number of years, but Dialogue is still around. It's a subsidiary of a company called ProQuest. And so, again, with companies like Dialogue, ProQuest, this information is things that is not sort of readily available on the open web. It's things that, there's a fee for them. But for many people, you can access information like that, Dialogue, ProQuest, things like that, through libraries. So I would recommend that you check with your public library, with your academic library, if you're affiliated with one, or if you have a corporate or organizational or government library, and really look into the real universe of information that's out there. And I think also folks within AIIP can help you with that. And if you'd like more information, all my contact information is on my last slide, and I'd be happy to kind of point you in the right direction. So getting back to leader now, we've heard a lot about passion in the past couple of days, tremendous amount about passion. Well, there's people who actually study this. So, it's one thing to say that, kind of you have passion for what you're doing, but what does that really mean? So this is from one of our research articles where I interview researchers. I didn't interview Melissa Cardin herself. I interviewed other researchers who were quoting her, but you see, so it's not just something off the cuff. You can read it there and you'll have access to the slides, but this whole idea that people actually study, when you say entrepreneurial passion, it actually means something. And then continuing on that, we did an article with Sunny Bonnell and Ashley Hansberger. They're really interesting people, two women in New York, I believe. Or I'm not positive about that, but they have their own PR firm, so an entrepreneurial company. And I love the title of this article, The Rare Breed, Why Weirdos and Misfits Make Exceptional Entrepreneurs. So, she also talks about a passion, but again, in relation to the things that you've heard over the past couple of days, it's one thing to have passion, but you also need these other things. So, raising capital, scaling a business, as I say, keeping the trains running on time. And we've really heard a lot about that over the past couple of days. So I urge you to kind of drink all this in, in the fullness of time, maybe after the conference is over, and maybe you've gotten a chance to watch some of the videos that you hadn't watched before. Danny Greenberg, Kate McCone-Sweet, H.J. Wilson. So there's a great Leader to Leader article about entrepreneurial leadership. And again, you see this idea of, thinking, self-awareness. We heard a lot about that in the conference in the past couple of days. And I will say that these authors are affiliated with Babson College near Boston. And if you're not familiar with Babson, I would recommend that you look them up, because they are a very, very entrepreneurial focused institution. And the year before my first book came out, so this is back in 2008, I was really privileged to speak at a conference. It was an all-day conference on innovation with a number of great thought leaders and professors from Babson. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. So I would recommend reading this article on the 3 principles of entrepreneurial leadership. Lauren Malian Bias, as some of you may be familiar with her, a serial entrepreneur. She's written a book, maybe a couple books. So she ties in entrepreneurship with innovation, kind of getting back to the Drucker book, Innovation and Entrepreneurship, but also reinvention, which I think is really important. And I think for a lot of the folks in this conference, you are reinventing themselves. I've reinvented myself a number of times. We don't really have time to go into that today, although I'd be happy to talk to people about it elsewhere. And I've written a lot and presented about reinvention. So you see that Lauren has kind of tied this in. And this, putting you on a new entrepreneurial path. And so one of the things I hope you're getting out of this conference this week is to really keep an open mind. That maybe, you came in here on Tuesday thinking one thing, but now, you've met new people, you've listened to new things, you've gotten new sources of information, you developed some new contacts, maybe you've contacted some of the speakers or asked them questions. And so maybe that's going to set you off on a new entrepreneurial path. So that also is a great article that I would recommend to people. I should say very quickly that we are Leader to Leader. We are behind a paywall. It's a subscription-based publication. So if you check us online, very often you're going to get something saying the full text is not available without paying. However, your library may have access to it through people like AIIP may give you access. Some articles actually are up there for free. But if there's certain articles that you just absolutely want to get and you haven't been able to get them elsewhere, when you see my contact information at the end, let me know and I'll send you a shareable read-only link. This is a really interesting article from Mark Goldsmith. And Mark is an older gentleman who had a long career in business, did a number of things in business, including entrepreneurial. He worked in various parts of corporate America, decided to go out on his own, had some really good ideas for kind of business to business ideas. And he did that. But then when he retired, he decided to get into the field of social entrepreneurship, which is kind of what Francis Hesselbein did. And that might be an avenue that people on this conference might be interested in. So he formed a great organization in New York. It's really won a lot of awards called GOSO, Getting Out and Staying Out, that kind of works with people who, mostly young men, who've kind of gotten caught up in the criminal justice system in New York City. And he works with them to help further their education so they can get meaningful employment. And so he's retired now from that as well, but it's certainly a going concern. And so the key thing here to look at is that he's saying that the skills and abilities that made you successful in business are transferable. And I think that's just so important, that this idea of transferable skills, because, it was brought up in some of the earlier sessions that some folks maybe are easing into entrepreneurship. They're still working for maybe a corporation or elsewhere. Maybe they're working for something in higher education. So, you've got these skills that you've developed in that way, but how are you going to apply those skills for being an entrepreneur? Because as we've heard, this is really an all-encompassing thing. It's not only all-encompassing in terms of your life and what it can do to your life. And especially, by the way, people like the social entrepreneurs who really want to solve problems, very knotty problems in society. But it means you have to do a number of different things. And Mark talked about in his article about how at the beginning he was kind of doing, everything on his own, but then slowly, maybe as they were able to raise more money, was able to bring on more people. So it couldn't be just himself. So Mark has a very interesting new book that's, I think, just about to come out that I would also recommend to folks. So I want to move on now from Mark to Whitney Johnson. Now, some of you may have heard of Whitney, another really fascinating person. She's actually done a couple of articles for us. So again, I'm really privileged to work with folks like this. So Whitney Johnson worked in the financial world. She's certainly somebody who has reinvented herself along the way. She was a colleague of the late Clayton Christensen, who some of you may know, unfortunately died a couple of years ago. But the man who he was the guru of disruptive innovation. So Whitney did a lot of work with him. This is a great book that she did called Disrupt Yourself. And you'll see that the front cover blurb is from Eric Ries, who wrote The Lean Startup, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So we're not going to go into the whole quote here from her Leader to Leader article. This is one of her 2 leader articles, but talking about this idea of constraints and that kind of looking at them as your friend and not your enemy, and that they may well lead to success. So she's talking about both innovation, as you'll see, entrepreneurship. I mentioned that she's somebody who is reinvented herself over the years. She actually started in college as a music major. And then through a variety of things after she graduated college, I believe she still plays music, but she got into the financial world and became very successful. And then she's kind of cycled off that now and has her own company in terms of, speaking, blogging, writing books and whatever. I would really recommend both of her leader articles, but also her books as well. Bernadette Jiwa, we heard a lot about this, that ideas aren't enough. Ideas are necessary. We've heard this on and off over the conference the past couple of days. It's great to have ideas. Ideas are necessary, but ideas themselves are not going to carry you through for tons of reasons. Some of this, by the way, I believe ties back to this idea I mentioned earlier about the folks at AIIP and competitive intelligence. You may have what you think is a great idea, but that idea has already been done or somebody's working on it now. And you could end up saving yourself a whole lot of, hassle and problems by really finding out, has that idea been done, or is it in the process of being done? But again, these ideas in terms of your mindset, curiosity, we've heard a lot about that. being imaginative, which I would think would be just a prerequisite for being an entrepreneur, and being an empathetic, and having things like emotional intelligence. So she's an author. I believe she's based in Ireland, but I'm not quite remembering that. But I know we want to get some time to the Q&As, and I could go, on and on talking about, leader to leader and the work I've done around information, and certainly my work writing about Peter Drucker and other things for my blog. I write for something called Corporate Learning Network. I'm on their, what they call their steering committee. And I recently started a blog for Psychology Today. So I'm kind of reaching a whole new, about Peter Drucker, called the Peter Drucker File. So I'm reaching a whole new audience of people. So one of the things I'll leave you with is this great quote from a man named Paul Arden. It's not necessarily entrepreneurship focused, from a book called It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be. So I think that particularly, though, is an entrepreneurship type of quote. But this wonderful quote of your vision of where or who you want to be is the greatest asset you have. And I will also tie that back into things we've heard over the past couple of days, because people have talked about different things about what may be your greatest asset. And invariably, it was not about, where you've got an office full of equipment or whatever. It's something more intangible than that. Somebody mentioned trust the other day. There were other things too. So Paul Arden, who is, he's no longer alive. He was a British advertising executive. And I reviewed one of his books for USA Today. So I would just kind of drink that in and think about that quote as you go on through the day and through the rest of the week and the weekend. So here's all my coordinates. There's my website. I'm giving you my direct email, although you can also contact me through my site. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm very active on Twitter. So please, if you're not already connected with me on those sites, please do so. I'm happy to tell you more about AIIP, and also kind of what you could learn from the world of the different types of libraries, and sort of so that you don't fall into this trap of thinking that the only information out there is something you can get with a Google search.